So we have a big day planned, a lot of lectures and things throughout the day. For this lecture, I have 4 things I'm going to cover. The first is going over scouting locations for nature photography, then some general guidelines, and then we'll go over composition and the amazing night sky. So the first one is the tips for researching locations. The first thing is that I stop off for nature photography at the ranger stations. And the ranger stations have a ton of information. A lot of the rangers have been through so many areas, the parks and other natural areas, so they know where the beautiful spots are and asking them where they like to, as well as asking local photographers where they photograph. I'm going to ask them maybe what their favorite hikes are. And if they happen to know, what is the best area, for what does it look great for sunrise and sunset, and where they might recommend for that. There's, of course, so much information that can be found online. Often search for local photographers, and the local photographers, like you, know all the great places in this area to photograph, right? And the local photographers, you can check out their images, and I might send them an email or call them and ask them if they have any recommendations for places to go. And then also online, of course, Google Earth, downloadable program where you can then see the images and click on the icons for a location. So here, Iceland, and click on the map, and then you could see photos of the location before you go. And thus, Google Maps also has that as well. My favorite 2 are Corbis and Getty. Those are the stock agencies. And the stock agencies have the best photographers in the world submitting their images. So they have some incredible images of any location you ever might want to see. So up next is the general guidelines. This is the bulk of the presentation. So I have a checklist. And the checklist that I go through in my mind, I've asked myself, have I used the rule of thirds? Have I filled every frame? Is there something going on in every corner, right? And have I eliminated any dead space and any, extra space? And then after that, after I've gone through all that, I recompose, recompose, recompose. So that's the mantra, to really get the shot right in camera and not have to fix it later with cropping or anything like that. So we're going to take a look at the 5 elements kind of as towards, I see it as nature photography. The first one is the thing itself, then the detail, frame, time, and vantage point. So we'll take a look at all of those. The first one, the thing itself. What is it that we find so compelling that we want to share that with others? We want to share that vision of who we are and what we are to people. And because whatever we photograph is a reflection of who we are, right? So, and how we're going to share that with others. And what are the subjects that we find so compelling that we're going to go and photograph and, present? The detail. Another one is photographing the detail. So it's very easy to photograph the grand scheme in a landscape, but also going up and photographing the details. Here, just including the bark of a tree. And our next is going to be time. And how do we convey time in an image, right? And I'm going to first pick whether the shutter speed or the aperture is most important and make sure that I get that set. In this case, I want to have a slow, blurry movement. To get the slow, blurry movement with animals moving, or people, or trucks, or cars, anything, that kind of blurry movement, I'm usually at a 15th to a 30th of a second, and then I'm panning the camera and stopping the action here in Birdie Falls with the waterfall. 200th of a second to stop the action, or 50th of a second to get that nice blurred look. Next one is the time of year and the time of day. Right? So the time of year photographing, of course, we've talked about the seasons, the fall colors, going at the peak of the fall colors, using the rule of thirds, and photographing in the winter, with the snow-covered mountains, or just after a snowstorm where it covers the trees. So the weather. The weather really, like the subject creates the interest, but the weather creates the mood. So the weather is so important for creating the image. So some of the things that we'll talk about and what to look for, the wind and the movement, the light and clouds, arriving before a clearing storm. It's kind of hard to catch a storm coming in, so that's why I say arriving before a clearing storm, and then hope that storm clears at sunrise and sunset so you get clouds and light and sunlight all at the same time, because that makes it more interesting. creating that fog, which creates that mystery, the rain for some saturated colors, or that first dusting of snow on the mountains. So up next, we have Vantage Point. And Vantage Point is, I think, what really brings it all together to create the composition for a landscape. So here are the key things for creating our perspective. We have our lens coverage, right? We know that if we, the perspective is going to be the same, or whether the wide angle versus telephoto, of course, unless you're really close with that wide angle, but that the distance to the subject of that is really going to create the perspective with our lens coverage, right? So we want to use our distance to the subject. If we want to isolate a subject, we want to get farther back. And if we want to include more of the landscape, we want to get close to our foreground elements, right? Of course, you can break all these rules and do anything you want. And then the camera angle, getting something different than just regular eye view, whether it's looking up at a scene, down, getting up higher, looking down upon a scene, or getting down low to the ground, you know, getting really low to the ground and close to those foreground elements to really help create a different perspective than we're normally used to seeing. So I try to work the subject and try to get different shots from every scene. So Calf Creek Falls, I got some straight on, then I moved off to the side. And then I used a different lens, started first with the 24, and then with the 100mm here, and then the 200mm, so I get a variety of shots from the same scene. Or back to our flowers, shooting both a horizontal and a vertical. And then photographing some flowers and getting up closer to them. Our next section is the amazing night sky and photographing the stars and the Milky Way. So I'll go over 5 tips for photographing the stars as points of light. The first is the lens choice, the shutter speed, the aperture, ISO, and the white balance. So we'll go over each of those. The first one is a wide angle lens. So use a wide angle lens for photographing the stars. So why a wide angle lens? Because as we're turning the stars, we see the stars moving, right? So if we have a wide angle lens, the stars are moving very slow through the frame. If we have a telephoto lens with this angle of view, they move very fast through the frame for the same amount of time frame. So the wider the angle lens, the more exposure you can get for your image, which is needed because it is so dark. So photographing the stars, tip 2 is your shutter speed. Basically 30 seconds or less. And then tip 3 is to use a wide open aperture. So a wide open aperture for photographing on the new moon when no moon is present. So the new moon is going to be very, very, very dark. So we want to use a wide open aperture in order to get enough exposure to make a good print. So f2.8 or faster for photographing the Milky Way. And tip 4 is ISO, and I use the manual mode of my camera. So we're going to set the aperture based on the lens, so wide open aperture. Then we set the shutter speed based on the focal length. And then we're going to bring up the ISO till you get a good exposure in the camera. And if you're looking at the actual meter, it's going to be on the plus side. And the tip 5 is the white balance. So the white balance, the sky is actually kind of a yellowish brownish color. So I set the Kelvin temperatures around 3400 to 4400. So 4400 right at twilight is still very blue, but a couple hours after sunset, then I'm down to 3400 where it's to make it blue. Because it's not blue, I just like the look of it. And so hopefully you will go out and have your own creative visions for how you see the night sky and how you see landscapes. And then take some great shots of the night sky with your own compelling and creative vision and ways that you see it. And you can check me out at jenniferwu.com. And I also do workshops, so lots of them. Death Valley, Hawaii, Alaska, and Greenland, Namibia, Tanzania, Iceland, Burma, and many others. And so that's it.